institutions and organizations such as the Commonwealth, World Bank and the ADB, amongst others, will be sought for the establishment of the Institute of Higher Learning, making it a multi-stakeholder partnership transcending national boundaries. It's my hope that Sri Lanka's proposal will receive extensive support and endorsement from the international community. Since the prescription for addressing climate change have to be dispensed in the global domain, we will meet again next year, charged with high hopes. However, the checkered implementation of previous decisions, including those of COP26, is extremely disheartening. Regrettably, the ground reality is that the fossil fuel-based industrialized countries of G7 and G20, who have been the main promoters of green hydrogen, are now backtracking to use fossil fuel. In the last year, carbon dioxide emissions increased by 2 billion metric tons, from 3.3 billion to 36.3 billion metric tons. Such double standards are unacceptable. Developed nations should be giving leadership to overcome climate challenges rather than abdicating their responsibilities. It is no secret that climate financing has missed the target. It's ironic that the $100 billion pledged annually have not been available in the coffers to finance climate challenges, as many developed nations deem it fit to renege on their climate financing contributions. These countries, who are also on both sides of the Ukraine war, seem to have no qualms spending for a war which will finally exceed $350 billion, a conflict waged purportedly for security interests of the combatants. The only security at stake is food insecurity, exacerbated to levels not experienced before the war. Many living both in the developed and the developing world are outside the scope of three meals a day. It is estimated that between 30 to 40 million people are being driven into hunger, especially in Africa. This war has also resulted in the upward spiraling cost of living, shortages of oil and gas supplies, and it has brought the fight against hunger to our homes. Expectedly, it has led to the curtailing of much required climate financing pledged by these very same countries. The issue we have is not of finding the party responsible for the war, but the party that will end the war. Why do we need this funding? It is known fact that the practice of colonialism transferred the rich resources of Asia and Africa to Europe and were used to industrialize their countries. We became poor from this plunder. This unbridled industrialization of the developed economies is also the root cause of climate change, the consequence of which we, the poor countries, are forced to suffer. Our problems are augmented due to the absence of adequate funding. Therefore, those in South are facing a double jeopardy, struggling to develop economically while fighting to protect the living standards of our population. It is therefore imperative that the developed countries deliver on their pledges in Glasgow by doubling their funding. Adding insult to injury, damages caused by extreme weather conditions are increasing, and their impact exceedingly costly. Developing countries who are the worst affected by the rise in emission from industrial world need to be compensated for loss and damage. Considering the failure of the developed world in bringing about the much-discussed relief, it is proposed that before we get to Dubai for COP28, like-minded nations should meet at ministerial level to discuss the way forward on all aspects of climate financing. This should be followed with the meeting of the heads of government of these countries on the margins of COP28 to display a collective frame of mind to stave off calamity. In conclusion, let me recall the UN Secretary General's recent words that the choice is between collective action or collective suicide. The vacuum created due to inaction now requires the global display of sustained political will by dynamic action and constructive cooperation on the part of like-minded countries to prevent this catastrophe. Let us traverse this path urgently. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Matamela Cyril Ramaphosa, President of South Africa. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Chairperson, Your Excellencies, heads of state and government, we are gathered here for COP27 on an African continent that is experiencing the worsening effects of climate change. For the sake of our continent and the world, we need a dramatic increase in global mitigation, an ambition to keep the world on the 1.5-degree pathway. Like other vulnerable regions, Africa needs to build adaptive capacity, foster resilience, and address loss and damage, as we agreed at Paris COP21. Chairperson, in order to achieve this, our continent will need a predictable, appropriate, and at-scale funding stream and technological support. This must support our right to development, international equity, and transmissions that are just and inclusive. This then places a great deal of responsibility on developed economies to honor their commitments to those countries with the greatest need and countries that confront the greatest environmental, social, and economic effects of climate change. The commitments that were made must be honored, because failing to honor these commitments breaks trust and confidence in the process. At present, we also have another challenge in relation to funding institutions. Funding institutions need to transform and change the way in which they fund projects that will enable us to develop with regard to climate change. Multilateral development banks, as well as other funding institutions, need to transform. At present, multilateral support is out of reach of the majority of the world's population due to lending policies that are risk-averse and carry onerous costs, as well as conditionalities. We need a clear roadmap to deliver on the Glasgow decision to double adaptation financing by 2025. Our emphasis must be on the health. Well, at a national level, South Africa is fully committed to achieving the most ambitious end of the mitigation range in our updated nationally determined contribution. As a country, we are guided by a just transition framework and an investment plan that outlines the enormous scale and nature of investments that are needed to achieve our decarbonization goals over the next 5 years. We are already scaling up investment in renewable energy and are on a course to retire a number of aging coal-fired power stations. At COP26 in Glasgow last year, France, Germany, the United Kingdom, the United States, and the European Union offered support in the form of a just energy transition partnership to South Africa. It is our hope that this partnership will offer a groundbreaking approach to funding by developed economy countries for the ambitious but necessary mitigation and adaptation goals of a number of developing countries. South Africa is hopeful, needed for South Africa to embark on this difficult journey are close on to $90 trillion. And we have said that the categorization of the funding needs to be well packaged so that there is meaningful grants, meaningful concessional loans, and investments by a variety of institutions. We are grateful and would like to pay our tribute and support for the Egyptian presidency and its confidence in the successful outcomes of COP27. We're grateful to be here. Thank you very much.